I've always been a dreamer, the kind of woman who gets lost in her own thoughts, weaving stories in her mind that are too wild, too bold, to ever speak aloud. My name is Emma, and at 32, I'd built a life that most would call perfect. Ryan, my husband, is the kind of man who makes you believe in forever, steady, warm, with a smile that still makes my heart skip after 7 years. Our home in Seattle is cozy, filled with books and soft blankets, and our weekends are spent hiking or curled up with wine by the fireplace. But beneath the surface of our perfect life, there's a part of me that's always yearned for something more, something that sets my pulse racing in a way I've never dared to chase. It's not that I'm unhappy. Far from it. Ryan is everything I could want, kind, attentive, with hands that know exactly how to pull me close when the world feels heavy. But sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I let my mind wander to places I've never shared with him. Places where boundaries blur, where desire takes on new shapes, where I'm not just Emma, the devoted wife, but someone bolder, someone who dares to taste the forbidden. I've fantasized about what it might feel like to share a moment, not just with Ryan, but with someone else, together, in a dance of whispers and shadows. The thought alone sends a shiver through me, equal parts thrill and fear. I've never breathed a word of it to Ryan. How could I? What do you say to the man you love about a dream that feels like a betrayal, even in your own head? That summer, everything changed. Ryan had planned a weekend getaway to a cabin by Lake Crescent, a place so beautiful it felt like a painting, crystal water framed by pine trees, mountains rising in the distance, and air that smelled like freedom. It was meant to be just the two of us, a chance to reconnect away from work and the noise of the city. But a week before, Ryan got a call from Jake, his best friend from college, who was passing through Washington on a road trip. He's only in town for a few days, Ryan said, his eyes bright with the kind of nostalgia that only old friends can spark. I invited him to join us at the cabin. You cool with that? I nodded, smiling, because what else could I say? Jake was no stranger. I'd met him a handful of times over the years, at our wedding, a couple of barbecues, a random dinner when he was in town. He was charming in that effortless way some men are, with dark hair that always looked a little tousled, green eyes that seemed to see right through you, and a laugh that made you want to lean closer. He was the kind of person who could make a room feel alive, and I'd always liked him, maybe a little too much. There was something about Jake that felt like a spark waiting to catch fire, and I'd caught myself stealing glances at him more than once. But it was harmless, I told myself. Just a crush, a fleeting thought, nothing more. The drive to the cabin was long, the kind of journey that makes you feel like you're leaving the world behind. Ryan drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my thigh, his thumb tracing lazy circles that sent warmth through me. We talked about everything and nothing, work, dreams, the way the sunlight danced on the water as we neared the lake. By the time we arrived, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The cabin was perfect, all wood and windows, with a porch that overlooked the lake and a fireplace that promised cozy nights. I felt a flutter of excitement, like something was waiting to unfold. Jake arrived an hour later, his Jeep crunching up the gravel drive. He stepped out, wearing a faded flannel and jeans, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "Emma, you're looking as radiant as ever," he said, flashing that grin that made my stomach flip. I laughed, brushing it off, but I felt Ryan's eyes on me, warm and knowing, like he could sense the way Jake's words lingered in the air. That first night was easy, comfortable. We cooked dinner together, steaks on the grill, a salad I tossed with herbs from the cabin's garden, and a bottle of red wine that Jake had brought. We sat on the porch, the three of us, as the stars came out, their reflections shimmering on the lake. The conversation flowed like the wine, from old college stories to dreams we'd chased and lost. Jake had a way of telling stories that made you feel like you were there, his voice low and rich, his hands gesturing in the firelight. I found myself watching him, the way his lips curved when he smiled, the way his eyes caught mine and held them a moment too long. Ryan was relaxed, his arm draped around my shoulders, his fingers brushing the bare skin of my arm. He laughed at Jake's jokes, added his own memories, but there was something in the air, a current I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the wine, or the way the night felt like it was holding its breath, but I felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing the three of us closer. I caught myself wondering what it would be like to reach out, to touch Jake's hand, to feel Ryan's gaze on me as I did. The thought was so vivid it made my breath catch, and I excused myself to refill my glass, needing a moment to steady my racing heart. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, the cool wood grounding me. The cabin was quiet except for the crackle of the fire outside and the low hum of Ryan and Jake's voices. I closed my eyes, letting the fantasy I'd buried for so long rise to the surface. It wasn't just about Jake, or even about the idea of a third. It was about surrendering to desire, about letting go of the rules I'd always followed. I loved Ryan more than anything, but I wondered if he'd ever felt the same pull, if he'd ever imagined us stepping into that uncharted territory together. "Everything okay in here?" Jake's voice broke through my thoughts, and I opened my eyes to find him standing in the doorway, one shoulder against the frame. He looked relaxed, but there was something in his eyes, a question, a spark. "Yeah," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be. "Just taking a moment." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the cedar and smoke on his shirt. "You seem different tonight, Emma," he said, his voice low, like a secret. "Like there's something on your mind." My heart pounded, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. He was so close, his presence filling the small space between us. I could have stepped back, laughed it off, but I didn't. Instead, I looked up at him, my lips parting slightly. "Maybe there is," I whispered. "But it's complicated." He smiled, slow and deliberate, and I felt a rush of heat. "Complicated's my favorite kind," he said, and there was a teasing edge to his voice, but his eyes were serious, searching mine. Before I could respond, Ryan appeared in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the firelight. "You two conspiring in here?" he asked, his tone light, but his gaze moved between us, sharp and curious. "Just trying to steal your wife's secrets," Jake said, stepping back with a grin, breaking the tension. But Ryan's eyes lingered on me, and I wondered what he saw, my flushed cheeks, my quickened breath. He crossed the room, slipping an arm around my waist, his touch possessive but gentle. "Careful, Jake," he said, his voice playful but with an undercurrent I couldn't quite read. "Emma's full of surprises." We returned to the porch, but the night felt different now, charged with something unspoken. The conversation drifted to quieter things, the sound of the lake lapping against the shore, the way the stars seemed close enough to touch. Ryan's hand rested on my knee, his thumb brushing slow circles, and I felt Jake's gaze on us, warm and steady. I let myself imagine it, just for a moment, what it would be like to lean into that warmth, to let the boundaries between us dissolve. As the night grew late, we moved inside, the fire casting shadows on the walls. Ryan suggested a game of cards, something to keep the evening going, and we sat around the small wooden table, the air thick with laughter and wine. But the game felt like a pretense, a way to delay what we all sensed was coming. Every glance, every brush of fingers as we passed cards, felt like a spark. I caught Ryan watching me, his eyes dark with something that wasn't jealousy but curiosity, maybe even desire. And Jake was aflame, drawing us both closer. When the game ended, Ryan stood, stretching, and said, "I'm gonna grab some more wood for the fire." He paused, looking at me, then at Jake. "You two behave while I'm gone." It was a joke, but it hung in the air, heavy with possibility. He stepped outside, the door closing softly behind him, and suddenly it was just me and Jake, the fire crackling, the room too warm, too small. I felt his gaze before I met it, and when I did, my breath caught. "Emma," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on in that head of yours?" I could have lied, could have brushed it off, but the truth was clawing its way out. "I'm not sure," I said, my voice trembling. "But I think I want to find out." He leaned closer, just enough that I could feel the heat of him, the promise of something more. "And Ryan?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I swallowed, my heart racing. "I think he wants to find out, too." The door opened, and Ryan stepped back inside, his arms full of logs. He paused, looking at us, and I wondered if he could feel it, the tension, the unspoken question hanging between us. He set the wood down, his movements deliberate, and then he crossed the room, sitting beside me, his hand finding mine. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice soft, but his eyes were on Jake now, steady and unreadable. Jake leaned back, his smile easy but his gaze intense. "Just talking," he said. "But I think we're all wondering the same thing." Ryan's hand tightened on mine, and I felt a surge of courage, a need to be honest, to lay it all bare. "Ryan," I said, my voice barely audible. "There's something I've been thinking about." "Something?" "I've never told you." He turned to me, his expression open, waiting. And in that moment, with the firelight dancing in his eyes, I knew I couldn't hold back any longer. I took a deep breath, and I told him about the dreams, the fantasies, the part of me that wanted to explore, to feel something new, together. My voice shook, but I didn't stop, and when I finished, the room was silent, the only sound the crackle of the fire. Ryan didn't speak at first. He looked at me, then at Jake, and I braced myself for anger, for hurt. But instead, he smiled, slow and warm, and squeezed my hand. "You're not the only one who's thought about it," he said, his voice low, and my heart leapt. Jake leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes locked on us. "So what do we do about it?" he asked, and there was no judgment in his voice, only curiosity, invitation. The air felt electric, alive with possibility. Ryan's hand slid up my arm, his touch grounding me, and I felt Jake's gaze like a caress. I didn't have answers, but I had this moment, this night, this chance to step into the unknown. I looked at Ryan, then at Jake, and I felt a smile curve my lips. "Let's find out," I said, and the words felt like a key turning in a lock, opening a door to something new. The rest of the night was a blur of whispers and shadows, of hands brushing hands, of laughter that felt like a promise. We didn't rush, didn't push, but every moment was laced with a quiet intensity, a dance of glances and touches that said more than words ever could. The cabin felt like a world of its own, a place where time slowed, where we could be whoever we wanted to be. By the time the fire died down, we were tangled together on the couch, not in the way I'd once imagined, but in something softer, sweeter, a shared understanding, a closeness that didn't need to be defined. Ryan's arm was around me, Jake's knee brushing mine, and I felt whole, alive, like I'd finally dared to chase the dream I'd carried for so long. The lake was still outside, its surface reflecting the stars, and I knew this night would stay with me forever, not because of what happened, but because of what it meant. It was the night I learned that love doesn't have to be confined, that desire doesn't have to be hidden, that sometimes, the boldest thing you can do is open your heart and see where it leads.